Okay guys, the Hardware Hound's gonna try something a little bit new this time around. So the LIQTech TR4 2 is, well, as you would imagine, meant for the TR4 socket. It is specifically designed for Threadripper. Well, I don't have a Threadripper chip on hand, so I kind of was like, maybe I could get this thing to work on Ryzen. I'd like to see how well it performs. And Enermax said I could. I got it. And it doesn't have any mounting possibilities for, well, Ryzen and AM4 sockets. So we have to do some modding. This will be fun. I've never really tried this before. What could possibly go wrong? Okay guys, this is one beast of an all-in-one cooling unit in certain ways. So in other ways, it's like every other closed loop cooler. So as we look at this radiator, I mean, it's got a pretty nice little rugged look here to the side that Enermax has done, and I like that. And I like the design of the fans. The fans look nice. So we've got this very rugged, like, you know, kind of screams, hey, I am here to cool Threadripper. But I mean, when we boil it back down to what we're getting, we've still got pretty much a solid, standard aluminum radiator, and that's going to be all right for performance, but it's not going to be anything super special in and of itself. You know, the fans are going to have a part of that, but, you know, once again, fans are kind of fans. There's some fans that are slightly better than others. I've had pretty good experience with the Enermax and their airflow as well as their static pressure, but the real key here is going to be this ginormous stinking block that we got. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this. And quite frankly, guys, I don't feel like there's any good way to do this. So let's just do this sideways like that. Look at the size of this guy. I mean, it is just absolutely huge. And that's so it can cover that whole die on the Threadripper chip. And so if we flip this guy around, we've got a ginormous copper block right here. I mean, they don't get much bigger than that, do they? So my question though then comes is, all right, this is designed to cover the whole heat spreader on a Threadripper chip, but what if this giant block and this giant copper plate gives us some additional cooling performance on even just a regular chip? So even though the Ryzen, the Ryzen die is only going to cover a fraction of this, could the extra copper help with more heat transfer, give us some better performance? So that's the thing I really want to see. Let's go ahead and do some quick looks at how I modded this thing. You can already see I've got holes here. More detail of how I got this thing to work on Ryzen, and then we're going to get into our testing results. As you can imagine, using a cooler that is designed specifically for Threadripper may not work so well for AMD or AM4 sockets. So we had to do a little modding, and as you can see, I had to make some holes. My first holes didn't work out because I tried to center the block completely on the Ryzen chip. And well, this part, well, it would be this part of the bracket was touching the capacitors on my motherboard. So that did not work. So I ended up having to do a little more over, and I had to cut a notch in here. But now we should have a bracket system that's going to work out. I have just put a Threadripper cooler on an 1800X. I cut down some smaller pieces of metal and drilled the holes so that it kind of pushes down on the 4 points of the bracket using the included back plate from AMD. So it worked out pretty well so far. We're gonna have to see if the testing results give us some good results. Guys, I don't recommend you try this at home because this thing can easily over tighten and have problems. You know, I'm kind of doing this by feel, and even though I've done this for several years and I've had a lot of experience with tweaking coolers and stuff, even I could end up having over tightened something just a little bit, causing myself some problems. So I do not recommend trying this at home, but I am looking forward to testing this guy out. So let's go ahead, get this baby powered up, see how well we're gonna do. Alrighty, so let's take a look at this lighting. There's not a ton to look at on this particular cooler. But as you can see, we've got an addressable RGB logo and then an outside ring, which looks pretty sharp on this cooler. You can also use an included controller or, you know, addressable RGB from your motherboard to control it if you plug in the cable. If you don't plug in the cable though, you'll get just this rainbow effect like I've got right here. But there's a key thing to remember. This RGB effect works best if you are using full speed on the pump. So if I take this, say, to like silent, you'll watch as that power goes, look at what happens. The light just kind of stopped. So it doesn't really cycle well if you're not using full power. And something that, now if I go like to like a normal curve, then as that starts slowly, you'll start kind of seeing these colors gradually change just a little bit. So you can kind of see that the power really affects how this RGB lighting works if you're not using the additional control. One thing that Enermax could have done here, I just put it back to full speed, is if they had used a PWM control instead of just a 3-pin for the pump, then they could be running full power for the RGB lighting at all times while still having, but then still having pump control to slow down, speed up. Of course, that, you know, cost, production, pumps, a little different than fans, all that fun stuff. But there you go, guys. Just a quick little look at that lighting. Now let's actually get into performance. Let's talk about these performance numbers, and let's just see if this, you know, big, huge big, huge CPU block is doing it for us. So as you can see, 51.2 degrees on that core temperature, which is top-notch performance. But we're not super far ahead of the LiQTfusion 240. And so it kind of shows you that maybe, you know, making a giant block in terms of you know, cooling performance on, dang it. All right, guys, let's just get through these numbers here really quickly. So we've got, on the LiQTech, we've got a 51.2 degree core temperature on our 1800X, and that does give us the lowest temperatures out of everything. Unfortunately, though, we're not seeing huge dramatic improvement over the LiQTfusion 240. And if you look at our noise level, that 54 decibels is quite a bit higher than the 49 that we got off of the LiQTfusion. So when you start comparing it in those regards, you have to realize that I guess the giant block isn't making a huge difference on smaller chips. In the end, it's going to be airflow from the fans that seem to make the biggest difference. But to get crazy amounts of airflow, you also have to get higher noise levels. And that's kind of the bummer. So really, guys, probably good thing that Enermax is keeping this guy specifically for Threadripper, because the extra cost and materials to make a bigger block for just a regular Ryzen socket is not going to really pay off. But when we're talking about Threadripper, I mean, that's some solid performance. I really think that the LIQTech TR4 2 is a great cooler for the Threadripper chip. You know, it would be really helpful if I could have a camera guy follow me around, because then you could have seen me yelling and screaming and getting ticked off, because as it turns out, drilling through hardened steel isn't always that easy. I mean, I don't know why though. My first holes went great, but the last one was, and then I go talk to maintenance guy from my work, and he's all like, yeah, just get this Dremel, and he just right through it, and it was done. And I'm like, so you guys got to miss out on all that struggle and heartbreak that I had. But we got this thing to work, and we got some pretty cool cooling numbers on it. I really I love the idea of having a closed loop cooler that will give us awesome performance. And that's really what we saw. It's not necessarily that we're going to get super crazy different levels of overclocking numbers, but it's just nice to have that cooler that just really takes those numbers to a high level. this is definitely a solid option for the TR4 socket. The full covering of the block is going to help dissipate that heat better. And yeah, this is just with a 240mm rad. Enermax also will have 280mm versions as well as a 360. So when you get to those really higher and larger radiators, you're going to get even better performance. Enermax in general always just does a great job with their closed loop coolers though overall. Of course, the TR4, we don't have to worry about back plates and stuff, so that's one thing that I don't have to pick apart this time around, although I've seen that on some other coolers. But considering what we're dealing with, I mean, you know, even just here, you can see we've got some nice sleeve cable looks. We've got a lot of accessories, you know. They give us fan splitters, so you can use one fan header on your motherboard for both fans. They give us an RGB control, so if you don't have a 3-pin RGB header for the lighting, then you can just use, oh yeah, there's a little plug-in hole there. You can just use, you know, the control thing that they give you. They give you thermal paste. They give you a Molex to fan connection, so that if you're running out, they just give you so many options, and that's one of the great things I love about Enermax. So this has been a fun experiment, but I definitely would say, yeah, great cooler for TR4. Don't necessarily try this at home though for like an 1800X or 2700X, because you could cause damage to your computer. But I thought it was pretty fun to see if we could make it work. Let me know, guys, what you think of this video, and just let me know if you enjoyed my little modding experiment. Who knows? Maybe this will come more modding down the road. I will catch you later.